Hi there. Welcome to New Tracks Modeling. New Tracks is an exciting new digital opportunity to obtain mentoring to help you improve your modeling. You will meet talented modelers and manufacturers from all over the world who share their model building skills and artistic advice. Improve your modeling and increase the confidence in your modeling efforts. Share your building efforts with fellow modelers and have some fun doing it. The shows are live on Zoom and YouTube, so be sure to join in and ask your questions. Now here is New Tracks founder and your host, Jim Kello, MMR.
Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really do appreciate it. And Pat, if you could spotlight me, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Hope you come back often and hope you tell your friends about us. Before we start the show, I want to go to Father Ron Walthers for the prayer for our show. Father Walthers?
Creator of the world, as modelers and makers, we recognize the intricacy and the beauty of our world. We thank you for the vision and the artistry you have given us. Continue to bless us with your creative spirit. Amen.
Father, we really appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Well, if you have not yet gone to our website, I hope you'll please do that and subscribe to it. You'll get a weekly email with our login links for our Zoom show, and therefore you'll be able to join us live on Zoom. We have 860 members now that have subscribed to our website, and the subscribers on our YouTube channel are about a little bit over 1,500, about 1,600, something like that. So we are gaining subscribers, and we're happy about that. But the more the merrier. And if you do subscribe, then you can see what we're doing and where we're planning to go next, and also be able to join us live. So please subscribe to our website. Our website is newtracksmodeling.com. You're also then capable of donating to our scholarship fund. We just had the announcement of our first year's winner, and we're very pleased about that. We selected a very, very talented modeler for our first year's winner, and we're looking forward to even being able to offer more and larger scholarships, hopefully, this coming year. So we need your subscriptions. We need you to donate to our scholarship fund, and it's on our website. So if you go to newtracksmodeling.com/scholarship, you'll get all the information you need to be able to make a donation to our scholarship. It makes no difference how much you donate. The purpose of it is for today's modelers to show the future modelers that we're behind them, that we're interested in them, that we want to help them learn the skills and the techniques of being able to build models in our hobby. But we also want them to get a great education so they can provide the leadership our hobby is going to need to take us into the future. And believe me, if you talk to dealers, if you talk to distributors, if you talk to manufacturers, there's going to be a need for an awful lot of leadership in the future to make the hobby as great as it is today. So again, if you can contribute something to our scholarship fund, we sure would appreciate it. We've got a goal set for $4,000 to raise this year. And we're far from that right now, but we're optimistic that we're going to be able to raise that kind of money, and it's going to be your help that gets us there. I'm happy about the articles that they're printing for me in my local newspaper. I tell you the truth, I had a grandmother bring her grandson over to see my layout last week. and he's studying computer science. And one of the programs that Earl Hackett has been wanting to find somebody to help teach is the Blender program or Bender program. I forget how you pronounce it. That allows you to do 3D CAD figures and get them in any shape you want, and fat, skinny, whatever. And that's one of the programs that he's learning. So I hope at some point in the future he'll be able to come on our show and help us learn how to use that kind of technology, because then we can make our own figures, and that would be neat. I'd like to be able to do that. I probably won't, but I'd like to be able to do it. But that encouraged me, and it would never have happened. I'd never have met him, never met his grandmother, if it hadn't have been for the newspaper articles. They don't take a lot of time. The editor is easy to work with. And I'm sure that your local newspaper would do the same thing for you if you're in that kind of a shape, and if you want to write about model railroading. It's a market that we haven't touched, as far as I know. Model railroaders write for the Model Press, the magazines that we all subscribe to. But I'm not aware of anybody that's writing for local newspapers. And that's a market, a tremendous market of potential model railroaders, whether it be people getting ready to retire or the parents of young people who can get them interested, possibly because of our scholarship. So I think there's an awful lot of opportunity there if the people in the hobby today will step up and write something that gets printed in the magazine, in the newspapers. It's easy to do, I promise you. And based on my experience, it's been nothing but very pleasant. So I encourage you to try to do that, because the more information we can get out to the general public, I think the better the hobby is going to be in the future. The My Build is coming up next week, and I'll now turn it over to the host of the My Build, Chris Course. Chris, welcome.
Thanks, Jim. All right, we'll go to the share screen real quick here. All right, next week, My Build, September 20th. To participate in My Build, email me, railrunner130@hotmail.com. And it's a free-for-all, so send us whatever you've got, whatever you're working on, whatever you found at a garage sale or whatever. I know there's tons and tons of neat stuff out there that people just find and they're like, I'm not quite sure what to do with it. Bring it to our attention. We'll I'm sure there's some people that have some interesting ideas what could be done with it. And also, while we're at it, the October challenge will be Halloween. So bring us your abandoned buildings, your haunted houses, abandoned railroad cars, scarecrows, derelict engines, your fall scenes, pumpkins, trick-or-treaters, anything that falls into those categories. Maybe something that's spooky. So again, please email me, railrunner130@hotmail.com, those pictures. And that'll be for the October 18th show. Also, with those, please try to get me your photos before about that Sunday prior to it. That way I can do it some justice and put these all together, because when I end up in a situation where I'm trying to add stuff last minute, I kind of feel bad that people don't get the fair shake that they deserve with it. But anyway, I'll turn it back over to you, Jim.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. I got to ask, how's the ship coming?
I've worked for like the last week and a half, so I haven't really had a chance to get to it. But I do have parts on order, so we'll get that out as soon as we can.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Well, the next Modeling Lifestyle is the September 28th show. That's a Thursday evening. The only way that you can join us live is on our YouTube channel, New Tracks Modeling. Our guest is Martin Breckbilt, NMR, with 3 of his friends. And I think you're really going to enjoy this, because Martin has built some models on our show. But that's not the total picture of Martin Breckbilt. So If you want to find out who Martin really is, join us on the 28th of September, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on YouTube. Phil, do we have? Yes, we do.
Join the modeling lifestyle at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on September 28th, where we will feature the modeling lifestyle of Martin Brechbale. Martin is an O-scale modeler and builds an amazing array of cars, motor units, and trolleys. Join Jim Kello, Martin, and his friends as they discuss how modeling has been a major part of Martin's life.
Really looking forward to doing this one with Martin. Martin's a great guy, and he's been so helpful and supportive of our show that this really ought to be an interesting discussion. So with that said, let's start our show tonight. First off, I'd like to introduce you to Carrie Shurgold, MMR, who's building the company store Walthers kit, which is a plastic kit that when he's finished, you'll never recognize. Gary, welcome.
Thanks very much, Jim. Yeah. We go through, I don't know why this keeps jumping back to number 1, but do a quick flip here. Okay, part 2, working on the foundation, changing it to stone or your choice of material. This kit comes as a concrete foundation, which is nice if you want concrete, but I found it looks much better with a stone foundation. So what I did, I had some, I had some material, and just prior to getting into that, last week I was asked about the tools that I used, and one of them I custom made my own blades for it. And the question was, what pair of scissors did you use? And I said I would bring that up and show you what these scissors are. This is a pair of scissors. They're not very big. And what I use them for, they're excellent for cutting thin metal. As you can see, they have a serrated edge right along here on the one blade. And they cut metal, not really thick metal, but sheet metal really, really well. And this is the size. They're about 6 inches long. And I picked these up at Walmart in the craft department. So that's the type of scissors we use. So getting back to the foundation, this is what the foundation looks like in the kit. And these here sides, of course, go around the inner part of the foundation. And the facing side is just straight flat plastic, which you would paint into concrete if that's what you wish, or you can actually use any material at all. But what I did, I put this together, made sure it was square, and glued it. You can see it's just very, very plain. Another shot showing what it looks like all together. It goes together nice. Little slots allow it to fit in. And the biggest problem, or it's not really a big problem, but just get everything nice and square. So what I do is I take this clear plastic stone material, and I start off with the colors. Now I've been using this method for quite a few years, and I have these 5 bottles. I mark them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I start painting. Once the stuff is glued on to the sides, I start painting it, starting with number 1, the odd stone here and there, And then I go number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, till it's completely filled in and painted. And you can see here, I've got a nice long strip that is done, and that is going to be measured, cut to size. The folds which go along here and here, you don't have to worry about these end pieces because you don't see them once the porch and all that is on. So here we have the foundation, stonework put in, already painted. Then what I do is, after that is put on, I take my wonderful weathering mix here, which is Hunterline shale. And I very carefully, you don't need a lot of this stuff, just a little bit, and I start blending. So what we have here is one that I started at, and these are pretty prominent colors. And then once you put that shale over top, it completely blends all the stone in and then lightens the stone, or takes that highlight away and just blends it all in really nicely. Okay, you can see here, again, these are the colors that I've used. You can pick your own colors for your stone. Just go with that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mixture. And this is the foundation with the building on top. Give you an idea of what it looks like. And that is the end of part 2. Next week, we'll have part 3. We're going to talk about the windows, walls, and doors, and the finishing and assembly. And I thank you very much, Jim.
Anybody have any questions to Gary?
No, but Gary, thank you for showing those shears. I've got 2 of those Zona saws, and I'm going to take one of them and try to make those little scribers like you made.
Yeah, they're really handy scissors.
Greg, let us know how it worked out. What problems you had, or what do you think of it once you got them fixed?
Okay, as long as the problem doesn't mean I can't type anymore.
Any other questions for Gary? Thanks so much, Gary. Look forward to next week.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Well, now I want to introduce Phil Edholm, who's got a guest, Kenneth Rimmel, and they're going to talk about local clubs and NMRA divisions. So Phil, welcome.
Hang on, I'm trying to do a spotlight here. I got to do some spotlights. And there's Kenneth. Howdy, Kenneth. How you doing? You're gonna have to unmute there. I unmuted you.
Yeah. Okay. How do I sound here?
You sound great. So wanted to welcome you to our NMRA divisions and local clubs, and talk a little bit. So tell us a little bit about your kind of background and where and your modeling experiences before we kind of start talking some more discussions.
It's pretty average. So the first real train set I got was a Lionel 027 back when I was about 8 years old for a Christmas present. And believe it or not, I still have it. And believe it or not, too, despite all the staged accidents, nothing's broken on it. After my father passed away, I was able to get his Lionel. It had a smoking engine. He got that one after he got out of the war in 1945. And I've serviced that, and that runs pretty good too.
Excellent.
My first train set, we actually started building that in 1960, and that's still around, even though it's only about 50% complete. It's enough to run something on, just to test stuff. I've since bought so much other HO equipment that it's too long to run on the layout because the curves are too tight. but most of my operation is with a major club that I belong to here in St. Louis. It's the Otis Model Railroad Club in the St. Louis area. Having farmed out of Webster Groves High School back in 1938. When the club was around, I noticed in the old model railroader magazines that we used to have a good dozen or so clubs in the St. Louis area, but we're the only one that lasted this long. Next newest club was formed in the late 1960s.
Well, tell us a little bit more about your club and the challenges you're facing.
The biggest thing is that in the beginning, we lucked out pretty well because our first club president, his father knew the colonel of the St. Louis chapter of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And so he set up a meeting with a 17-year-old teenager with the chief operating officer of the Frisco Railroad down at the headquarters downtown St. Louis. And through a handshake deal, we got permission to use one of two waiting rooms in the Webster Groves Depot. And so that went on quite a while. Things almost got a little rough when in the late 40s, early 1950s, the club was talking to different people, especially in the railroad, if there's a building with a bigger room, because the room we were in, we're only measured about 20 by 40 feet. So you can imagine trying to put an O-scale layout in a building that's in a room that small. But the club got it working. And when the railroad found out that they didn't have anything on record of us being in that building, we set up an agreement. We incorporated ourselves as a nonprofit because one of our members turned out to be an attorney, which helped. And also started signing 10-year leases with our room. Later on in 1992, long after the rail service stopped there, the passenger service, after that's ended, the signal maintenance department took over the other half of the building because in the baggage room, they needed something to put their section car in and other heavy equipment. Well, they moved out in 92. And then 2 years later, we had some members at the club one Saturday. Yeah, it was a Saturday. They saw somebody walking around the outside of the building, thought that they might be interested in seeing the layout or something like that. So one of our members walked out and talked to them, and that surprised them because it turned out to be a contractor that the railroad hired to demolish it in the upcoming weeks. So we had less than a month to do something about it. But luckily, there was enough former Frisco people in Burlington Northern headquarters in Texas that still remembered a few things. And we had a good supervisor in the leases and contracts department who, in fact, after he retired, he moved into nearby Pacific, Missouri and visited us once not too many years ago. But we ended up purchasing the building at a reasonable cost, got a long-term lease on the portion of land it sits on. And in a way, thankful that it's still railroad property. We don't have to worry about paying taxes or too many other things to worry about. But that building was constructed and opened for service in 1910. And you know what railroad maintenance is like. So we had our hands full.
So kind of tell us the status where you are today then.
Well, right now, thanks to some good donations, especially from one local resident, we've got about 80% of the money we need to replace the 73-year-old roof, which has cement asbestos tiles on it. And having asbestos in there, it means that there has to be a certain licensed roofer that can handle that stuff so they can properly bag it and send it to the proper dump. Because we found out with that roof we've got, just to have a normal, any kind of roof surface, it's going to cost us close to $70,000. But
hey, so have you expanded the layout then beyond the original room, or?
Yeah, as it turned out, in the late 1950s, I think it was around 1959, the railroad contacted us, and they told us that, oh, we got some railroad salvage, a whole bunch of carload of cinder blocks. We can enclose the west porch of the building for you, because it had an open porch at each end. And the room we were in was the larger of the two waiting rooms. And beyond that, it had an open porch area, which when they enclosed it, it gave us almost another 500 square feet. So the old layout was torn down in the early 1960s, and we currently have an 18 by 68 foot layout in there. You wouldn't believe it. You think it's some kind of loop, but it's really a point to point with a reversing loop at each end. And I'd say counting the passing sidings, we've got perhaps about 840 feet of mainline track in there with 2 yards.
And how many members do you have?
We currently have about 28 with about 10 to 12 that are active enough that help us in different farms, whether to run trains, man visitor control during our operation sessions, which is the first Tuesday of every month, and any other activities we might do. Because we have 3 members that are designated as what we call building trustees. Their responsibility is to find out what needs to be repaired or maintained in our building, our immediate grounds around us, figure out what's the best way to repair it. If it's something we can do we have to have a contractor come out and do it, such like if it's plumbing or electrical, and then find out if we need money for it and work out plans to raise some donations.
So beyond the operating sessions you have, do you also have sessions open to the public and encourage the public to visit, or is that?
Well, the operation sessions, the open house that first Tuesday, that's where you get the public in. We do meet every Tuesday otherwise as members, and we're okay with, because in fact, we do get occasional visitors come in and watch, because we might be doing some work on some scenery work or move some buildings around, painting track, working on the engines or cars. We encourage it pretty much, because we encourage anybody who visits us, if you got a camera, iPhone, something like that, take some pictures, take some videos, post them on your page, put them on some other, share them on the internet and stuff like that, because it's good advertisement. Through all that, on our Facebook page, we've got followers representing about 20 different countries, including the United States.
Yeah. Well, O-scale clubs are fairly far between, so that's good. What kind of things do you do for the members for mentoring and engagement? Do you have, beyond the layout itself, are there other things you do as a group?
It's pretty much casual. We'll sometimes talk about different things, what your interests are. Some of our members are pretty well skilled in scenery or track work or something like that, or even repairing engines. One of our younger members, he's about 16 years old. We don't have to teach him much. He was able to repair a couple locomotives already without our assistance. But there's a couple of finer tips that we still had to point out to make sure that little shortcuts, and make sure you're careful about some stuff, because especially today's equipment, you've got to take so much other stuff apart before you can do some routine oiling sometimes. Lubrication, it's making it more difficult. It's almost the same equivalent of our automobiles.
That's true. Well, and O-scale, a lot of folks forget that O-scale is almost 8 times larger than HO, and so the torque and forces are much larger when running an O-scale engine. So it sounds like you've been doing some recruiting. You've actually gotten a younger member. Are there things you do beyond the open houses for recruiting? Do you go to any events or anything like that to try to make people aware of you, or?
Yeah, occasionally some of us will go to local train shows, as far way as across the state, because we're in Missouri here. And we'll take flyers. We'll set up a backboard that shows some pictures of our layout, how it used to be in the 1940s and how it is today. And pretty much let them know what we got, and also the fact too that besides our maintaining the layout, we've got an actual building we have to maintain too. And thankfully, some of the utilities the railroad helps us with, but we have to pay the rest. And according to our lease too, we have to make sure keep the building looking good, good order. Make sure that don't look like might be abandoned or a wreck or something. If it needs painting, fix it. If it needs cleaning up, fix it. Also, the immediate grounds around us too. And railroad property, especially this one section, the railroad will even let the local highway departments park their equipment on the grounds too. So then we have to sometimes compete with all that stuff.
That's interesting. So just out of curiosity, is the equipment in the club mainly privately owned by the members, or do you have club equipment as well?
We've got both, but the priority is if a member brings equipment, that equipment can't normally run first, unless the member says it's okay to set it off to the side or something like that. And plus two, that they have a choice of running their own equipment or letting one of the other members run it if they trust them. Okay.
Okay, so it's kind of all by the individual negotiation on managing that. So, well, excellent. Sounds like you guys have a great future. I guess the one question sounds a bit of a challenge is getting volunteers to do all those non-railroad things. It sounds like all the building maintenance and things you have to do. Is that a challenge for you?
To a certain point, because some of our members and even some of the local neighborhood people will even sometimes come out and help. Not trying to find the right ones that's good with carpentry or painting or something like that. We used to have help from the business district with cutting the yard that's to the west side of us. We've got a section that's about 100 feet by 250 feet that earlier this spring, the grass got over 5 feet tall. And because in the local community, they came up with this thing about no mow May for like the month of May or something like that. It was basically to any flowering plants, trees, or whatever, grass or whatever, don't cut it. It's for benefit of pollinating insects, especially bees. And it turned out that not too many people like it, including the city, because they even held back a little bit themselves with maintaining some city property. And they said, not next year. So,
well, good. Well, if there's one thing, any learning or specific things you'd want to communicate to other clubs that you think has been really good for your club, what would it be?
Biggest thing is keep communications open. If it seems like it might be getting too status quo, too normal, too slow, or something like that, ask questions or suggest something, and sometimes maybe even make a little game out of it or something like that too. So that some way you need to keep that spark glowing in there, and at least at a low flame, so you can make sure that in time they'll pass on the same information that they got from you.
Well, is the layout then fairly? Would you consider it fairly complete?
There's some areas that could use some more scenery. There was one spot which was added back in the 1970s because some of the members back then wanted to have an area where they can actually do some switching in a small yard, industrial yard. Well, pretty much after that was built, those members left the club. So that unfortunately entailed to taking away quite a bit of scenery. But in the end, it actually helped out because we had over half of the trackage actually was covered by scenery. So when you're running the train, especially for the public, you need to see something moving.
Right.
And in the end, unfortunately, it covered over 4 great-looking different types of bridges. We had all basically wood beam type bridges and stuff. But at least the trackage is more exposed, and it when you see the faces of the kids from 5 to 95, looking at their pointing like that, and some of the younger ones trying to run up and down, trying to pace the trains themselves, it makes your heart a little warm.
Excellent. Well, thanks, Ken. Really appreciate you coming in and talking to us a little bit about your club. Sounds like you've got a great situation in one of the few O-scale clubs that's out there. So thanks again, and really appreciate hearing about your club and the challenges and how you're overcoming and moving forward.
Yeah. One quick thing I want to add that early this morning, somewhere close to midnight, we had an unfortunate incident where for the 4th attempt from this one person since late August, tried to break into the building. And the first two attempts were kind of almost like childlike. The third attempt, he used a acetylene torch and cut the padlock off our baggage door, got in, but other than leaving an inside door open, he didn't do anything and left. But last night, he was back there again with a acetylene torch trying to cut the new lock off. But a neighbor spotted what was happening and called the police. They caught him. He's been charged and arrested. He's sitting in jail right now. And he claimed when the police talked to him that we had his stolen equipment in our building and he was trying to break in to get it back. If that makes any sense. So, laugh of the week, I guess. So
Sounds like you're gonna have to do something to keep him off the property permanently. So
yeah, and we just signed a deal with an alarm company too, and they're going to start working on it tomorrow. Too bad it wasn't 2 days ago.
so we did have one question. Tell us again the name of the club and exactly where you're located.
It's called Big Bend Railroad Club Incorporated. It's located at 8833 Big Bend Boulevard. It's in a suburb of St. Louis, Missouri, so you can use that or Webster Groves, which is where we started out in Webster Groves High School, and we're still in the community. And we're the second oldest railroad type group in the St. Louis, only be beaten out by the St. Louis Railway enthusiasts who started in 1932. But our official beginning is in 1938, and we've been going ever since.
Excellent.
And
Well,
our
thank you.
Facebook page is very well liked and stuff, so that's probably the easiest to find more information about us.
Well, if you have that, you might throw it in the chat so people can see it in the chat. If you have the Facebook chat link, that'd be great. Well, thanks, Ken. I really appreciate it. And with that, Jim, we'll throw it back to you, unless you have any
Ken?
other questions.
Yeah, I do. Ken, thank you so much for being here this evening.
Yeah.
We're so pleased that New Tracks Modeling and the Big Bend Club are working together now. It's a real honor for us, and we appreciate you wanting to be our partner. And thank you so very much for that. As you know, I'm writing an article about you and your club that'll be in the O Scale Resource magazine that comes out shortly. And don't forget our scholarship. We need all the donations we can possibly find.
Right. And thank you, Jim.
Yes, sir. Thanks for being here.
Thanks again.
Well, now I want to turn to our previous scholarship winner, Ethan Bernstein. Ethan is just a fantastic modeler, and we're so happy that he was the winner of our first year scholarship, and wish him all the very best in his education and in his future modeling. So Ethan is going to share with us some thoughts about what a young modeler is after and what he thinks the needs might be in model railroading and how maybe young modelers can be encouraged to join our group. And he's agreed to come on our show periodically, given the fact that he's still in college and we have to work around his college education a little bit. But Ethan, thank you so much for being here this evening, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, I apologize I didn't get a chance to prepare any slides for today, maybe another time, but so I'll just do a quick discussion of what I think, my experiences in the hobby, starting, in middle school when I joined a club, but I started really in the hobby in elementary school. And I know the first barrier, of course, is cost, right? Trying to buy, especially in some of all the scales, but N scale, for the size, it's really expensive, and it's in some cases now the same price as HO scale. But part of the appeal of the smaller scales to younger modelers is space. And N scale, for example, you can fit about 2 to 4 times the amount of layout in the same space as HO. And so it's very portable. And then if you go down to Z scale, which actually in most cases is twice the price of N scale for the same thing, where an engine will cost twice the price as the equivalent N scale engine, then you can fit more in the same space, but you're paying a lot more for it. So cost is a big factor. And then space is the main other limitation. And of course, the workarounds I had at the time were, I had some allowance money and I just saved up until I could afford that first train set. But then once I found my scale, what took me a while to realize is I was what's termed a lone wolf modeler, right, for a very long time. I didn't realize there's this bigger hobby. I went to my first hobby store, and that's where I got my first train set. But and in that store, everyone was very welcoming and inclusive, but there weren't very many advertisements for local clubs. So I didn't know there was really such thing as a model train club. I knew there's model train stores, and I loved chatting to people in the stores, but I didn't know about any clubs in the area. And so it wasn't until then I found out about model train shows and started going to those. And then eventually got the confidence to ask the really nice people at Bandtrack if I could join the club. But then I learned of this greater community, and that is really what has driven my modeling into the next level, and has continued to promote my interest in the hobby, is being able to gain experience from those who have been in the hobby for a much longer period of time. And then also as a side effect of that, there's like little nuances that are very I'm very grateful for from the club, such as just people passing on some of their stuff to me to use either for modeling, or if I am not interested in it, then I can sell it. And that's been a huge benefit. Like I got a whole collection from one really nice guy in Bandtrack, and I've gotten modules from them as they're just passed down through the club. That's part of being in the modular club, is you just inherit things over time to promote and keep sustaining the club, which is an awesome aspect and is really good for those who are limited in both time and money and in space. Because in a modular club, your module is pretty easy depending on the size, especially something like T-Track, to fit in a very confined space. And I'm starting to really trying to get into T-Track now, because my current room is very small. I have a little loop of track that runs underneath my bed. That's just fun. It's just some Cato track, but I definitely want to bring my modeling with me to school. And that's, there's a lot of materials that are involved there too, right? You got to bring your ground foam, your trees, your vehicles, all the instruments necessary to make a nice scene. Especially as you get more developed in your modeling skills, you realize how many more materials make the scene even better. You just keep adding stuff. But that can be a phased thing, and I'm working on that now. I'll bring a T-Track module here soon, and try and incorporate modeling into more of my daily life on a layout scale. Because right now here, what I do to fill my time when I have spare time, which is not very often right now, but when I do have that spare time and I need to find a way to relax, I always have little kits. I'm big into 3D printing, so I 3D print out a whole bunch of parts to make something. Like right now I'm building auto rack ramps for an auto rack facility on my layout back home at my parents' house. And so then in my meantime here, I can just assemble little kits, whatever I find, paint them up, detail them, weather train cars. I bring train cars to weather. I do some stuff for the NMRA, so I bring that with here too, to inspect train cars. And so that's just a little bit of how I have tried to incorporate the hobby a little more into, the confines of my current living situation. Once I can get a bigger apartment, I'm probably planning on going to grad school next, then maybe I can fit a few more T-Track modules in there, bring more of my supplies here. But going back and forth between home and here is still, there's a lot of benefits and somewhat annoying nuances. Like I can't run my layout every day and can't run my layout once a month, right? It's I go home for a break like 4 times a year. So it's a little tricky to actually get into building a layout at this phase of my life. And when you between your secondary and elementary school years, you have a little bit of time to at least begin investing in the hobby and building like little table layouts and stuff, but you might not have the skills yet to build a full layout. It wasn't until later in high school that I actually started building a full layout, and it's even now only about like probably 1/100th of the way complete, because it'll never be complete. That's the whole point, the joy of the hobby. But going into modular railroading, I think, is really good for younger modelers, and is a great way to promote the hobby to those who are new to it and also younger in age.
Ethan, let me ask you a question. How in the world do older modelers reach younger modelers? I'd love to have younger modelers, come on our show, be on our show, watch our show, whether they do it on YouTube later or however they do it. I'd love for younger modelers to hear from some of the really talented guys that are on the show and talk about how they're building. I just don't know how to attract them. How do we attract young people?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, even my experience in the hobby, I only know like 2 other people my age. And that's in an N scale club, in a pretty, I would say pretty diverse N scale club too. That's very open and accepting to younger members. And even at train shows, it's very few and far between. I don't know where that gap really is. Honestly, it took me a while to just figure out that's a thing I can go to train shows. And then once I was going to train shows, then I got involved in clubs. But the trick with clubs is, I can't go to most of the meetings like at all. Like during the summer months, it's usually when there are no train shows. And then when I'm at school, that's when all the train shows happen. And so the problem there is trying to figure out a way to, you can't really bring the trains to me. That's not how it works. So it's just a tricky phase in life, I think, that makes it harder to draw younger modelers to something like a club. Now, the forum you're creating here, I think, has amazing potential because, like, I'm part of NRAIL, right? They have Zooms once a month as well, and that's huge. NMRA magazines, I've been reading Model Railroaders since I started. NMRA magazine, I've been reading for a long time as well. And the NRAIL newsletter has been awesome, and I've contributed to that as well. And it's just, I'm not really sure where, because there's no way to assess how many younger viewers are actually seeing your content versus how many are actually wanting to be involved. And I think the advertisement might need to be more targeted. Like, we would like to have a feature for younger modelers to contribute their works, like something like Model Rotor. That's really daunting for me to try and contribute to, because I'm like, oh, there's all these experienced modelers. How am I going to get my article about, building whatever into that magazine? It just seems really daunting. And it wasn't like I took the initiative to reach out to NRAIL to contribute stuff after I gained confidence contributing things to my local club newsletter. But there's no advertisements in any of those magazines that would, I think, encourage younger modelers to contribute, because it seems so daunting compared to what everyone else has done.
Yeah,
that's just my view.
I got you. I appreciate it. Anybody have any other questions for Ethan?
Yeah, I'd like to ask Ethan a question. Ethan, is there a model railroad club at Hopkins by any chance?
There is not. I will be honest, and I was looking for schools. I did look at to see which ones had model train clubs, but I wasn't going to use that as the main factor. Academics came first, but there is no train club at Hopkins. We have other engineering clubs. I'm in design, build, fly, so we build RC airplanes, which is fun, but it is not model railroading, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I would love a club here, but getting them started and the interest is very low. So
I know MIT has one, and it's very well known, and the quality of work is excellent there. It only takes 1 or 2 people to start something, and at MIT, it's going on for decades. And I don't know if you want to look into that.
I have looked into it. I run 2 clubs here. I know the process that goes into getting them started. Hopkins is very strict about clubs. And that deters. We need at least 10 to 12 members to start a club, 12 members to start a club. And I've only met maybe 3 or 4 thus far. And I've reached out and tried to do more, but it is already tricky because I'm also running 2 academic clubs at the same time. So trying to start a model railroading club would, for me personally, be a bit of a challenge. But yeah, I wish there was one here.
We also have the Timonium show coming up in October. It'd be really nice if you came over and, sat at the table with us for a while.
Yeah, I'll be with Bantrack during the show. I go to every Timonium show that I can, so I'll be there. I'll stop by.
Come by the table and talk to us, okay?
Yeah, I would love to.
All right. Hope to see you there.
Any other questions for Ethan? Ethan, thank you so very much. I can't thank you enough for doing this for us tonight. Have a great time at Hopkins, and we'll see you shortly.
Thanks for the invite.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Well, now I want to turn to Tom Farrell, who is our local scratch builder, who is scratch building his total layout, and he's doing a fantastic job. And tonight he's starting a new project for his layout, a depot. So Tom, welcome.
Thank you for having me, and thank all the support people, Pat, Phil, and the others. I started a new project here, a new depot, and I'll give you the reasons here in a moment. So this is a depot for my shanty town. I professed in a show about a month ago that I had a old freight house that I scratch built that I really never liked. And my first inclination was to rebuild, make this into something that I could tolerate. But then I put it in place in Shantytown, and it just really didn't fit in. And it doesn't, it's sort of a freight house anyway. It's not really a depot per se. So I'm gonna go ahead and build a specific depot for Shantytown. And I'm going to show you a couple of this is a small depot that I scratch built and featured on the show here about a month ago. I show this because of the color scheme, the yellow siding, the green batten down below, and then the wood trim. This is the kind of look that I'm looking for, but something different. And then I have my big depot, the rustic buff depot, which is not on the layout yet. It's in storage, but it too is yellow and green and trimmed out in brown. So I thought I might go ahead and just build another depot unique to these two and use this color scheme. And this will be a two-part series. I'm about halfway through building this. So like all of my scratch builds, I start with a piece of aircraft grade plywood, and then I put a grid on there, 1-inch grid. This is the extent of my design. The rest of it just out of my head. So first thing I did is I put a foundation around. I'll show you the materials I used in a moment, but I used a brick foundation, 180 degrees all the way around this thing. Those strips were to bring the support level up to the same level as the brick. You'll see in a moment here what I'm doing here. But basically, I glued these very fine strips of wood in there, and then I placed a larger strip to bring it up to the height of the brick. My scale lumber was too short for to match the height of that brick. So these are the materials that I used. I have professed my liking for this Monster Works material. My foundation is made out of this old brick sheet. I cut about 4 bricks wide on there in strips. And this is a new material they have. It's a wood siding. You'll see some close-ups of this later on. This is a fantastic material. It has great highlights and detail. And I'm going to use it for the flooring, for the decking of this model. It's just a beautiful material. And this is my go-to Mount Albert basswood sheets. This is the clapboard for O scale. So there's the Monster Works brick, which I've cut into 4 brick high and cut it on 45s. And then I go back and I file this so it has the appearances that it's all one big piece. And this is the plywood base. This will get inserted into the foam, so the only thing visible will be the foundation. This is the siding. I've sketched out what I envision for the depot. It's going to be relatively small, and it's higher than normal. I wanted this old-fashioned depot look about it. I always mark my clapboard with up on there because I have assembled these scratch builds, and occasionally I'll reverse a siding and then have to tear the model apart. So right up front from now on, I always put up on there unless it's obvious. So here's the cutouts. This is the clapboard siding. Basically, the front and rear are the same and the sides are the same. It's uniform. And like all my scratch builds, I brace everything with 1/4 inch scale 12 by 12, but it's really 1/4 inch material, basswood. It's inexpensive to do and prevents any warpage, particularly in the painting process if you're using water-based acrylics. You also notice I'm using wood glue. I'm trying to get away from super glue. So I'm using yellow glue. Here's the structure getting built up. You can see I braced the crap out of it as usual. Again, this takes very little time and makes for a very robust model. And you will see no warpage from now to the next millennium. And there's that up, just so I didn't make that mistake. There's the looking at the outside. One thing you want to try and do is match this clapboard siding so that you don't have an offset. Even though you put trim on here, it's best to have a nice look where this is on the same plane. And there is that siding. And I have an enlargement here for you. I mean, look at the detail these guys have laser etched the flooring to have wood grain. It's just amazing material. And when you have a material this well detailed with this laser etched wood grain, you don't really want to paint it. You want to stain it with an alcohol wash. You'll see later on that I did a pretty interesting job with that, just using various colors of alcohol wash. A paint might fill this in or mask the laser etchings. Really a neat material, Monster Works. I strongly recommend you try this. There's approximately where I want the main structure to be. There will be a pavilion, if you will, out coming off here and off here. So there'll be two roofs that are at a slightly below the roof line here, one going off to the left, one going off to the right. So there'll be open baggage areas, if you will. So there's another view. So now this is where I've established this is going to go, and I've glued it down with wood glue. Now I've begun the painting process, and I frequently refer to these base coats as obnoxious colors. So this is a hay yellow, just this inexpensive acrylic craft paint. Again, this is the base color. I've put 2 coats on here, and I let it dry overnight before I really did anything to it. There's a little side view. See how these match? There's some more detail, that flooring. My other signature is I paint the inside of these structures black, just because I don't detail the inside of them. So if you do look through a window, and in this case you won't be able to, as you'll see later, you won't see anything, but I paint everything black. And I've also put a base coat of the on the brick here. I used a rust wash here, but I went back and later used a Tuscan scale coat because I wasn't really happy with that color. It looked too pink. Now I've begun the weathering process. I've put an alcohol wash on here, tone that color down a little bit. I'm just working around the building. For the windows selection, I'm using Grant Line, these Victorian windows with this triangular pediment. Grant Line does not come with pre-cut clear acetate windows. You have to cut your own. And just for my amusement, you have to cut it round for it to fit in here. So as you'll see later on, I rough cut the clear plastic, and then with a file, I rounded it. And I pulled that off. I made them in two pieces, one piece here and one piece there. Anyway, that's not a very good photograph. These are what I use. I also, I sprayed them with an automobile primer. Then I sprayed them with an emerald green, just with a rattle can. Here's a little bit more of the thing. And again, these are still, I consider, base colors. So, and it's very rough at this point. But I've trimmed everything out here with scale 1x4s this time. I thought 1x6s would be too large for this small little structure. I painted this with a green that's close to this. As you'll see, I'll go back later and paint. These will get painted the same color, but that spray emerald green is a nice base coat. And these window insertions I just pulled off of Google, brought them into PowerPoint. They're old-time curtains. Then I put in a blind behind it and printed them out, glued them with canopy glue to the reverse of the window. Again, we're still pretty rough here, but you're getting an idea what this is going to look like. Yeah, there's the paper and the canopy glue. I did go back when it was all dry and I sprayed dull coat in there just to seal that paper up. I don't know why I do that. I want it to last 10,000 years, I suppose. There's another look of the same thing. There's that paper again. Here's the roof. I ran out of 16th inch plywood. I didn't feel like making a run to Hobby Lobby or Menards or Lowe's. And I had this N scale siding that I've had for 30 years and it's very thin. And I thought it's basswood. So what I did is this is the underside of the roof. You're not going to see it, this siding anyway. See a nice detail, I suppose, if you look real hard. This is the perimeter of the roof. You'll see the black. It's on the other side. So the idea is when you look up here, you'll just see black. I've begun the additional weathering, trying to balance these windows with this. At this point, it's too white and chalky, but that's one of the weathering steps. Oh, and here you can see I've colored these boards individually. We'll have a close-up later, but these are different alcohol washes: grayish, a blue-gray, a black, a brown. I just randomly, that's a better shot in focus over here to the left. Randomly painted these boards, different colors of alcohol wash. It's a really nice effect. Because they're washes, you pick up that laser etching, the grain material. I went back later with a Q-tip and removed this smudge from the windows with alcohol, pure alcohol. There's a nice shot of that decking material. I mean, I just think it's gorgeous stuff. There it is. Tell me that doesn't look marvelous. And there's no effort on your part other than staining it. That's out of the box, if you will. Look at that, look at that etching. I mean, it's just amazing. I get excited over the little things, you know? These are the shingles. I use these on one of my 3 shantytown models. I put them on a large piece of cardboard, tape them down, and then I hit them with a primer here. The truth of the matter is, I'm not going to use this. I'm going to do this again with brown. I'm not going to use gray shingles. So this is a busted project there. There, I painted the roof black just to seal everything up before I put the Elmer's glue on and the shingles. And it's subtle, but I've scraped off a lot of that white chalky look to it with a wire brush, a brass brush. That's the finished model in here, the center here. These windows aren't quite finished here, but that's the final look right there.
That's neat.
That's it. Any questions this evening?
You just need to nail holes.
Yeah, I could go back, right?
Yeah.
All right, next time. So part.
It's not a question, Tom, but I also agree with Monster Model Works. Jimmy Simmons does some of the best laser etching of anybody in the business, and I've used many of his products for years. It's just, he does wonderful work.
It's really I think it's the best brick in the business, and that flooring is unique. Nobody makes, or siding they call it, wood siding. Nobody makes that.
Yeah, I've used it for flooring a lot more than siding.
And he also has concrete block, which I've used too.
Yeah.
They're just very nice materials, and he's always running a 20% sale, so you just watch for that. And he focuses around holidays to have these 20%. I always restock myself at that point. So part 2 next week, I shall have that structure finished. Yeah.
Tom, let me ask you this. What was the hardest part of building that building up to this point?
This one, I really spent a lot of time with the weathering, trying to get the colors right. Normally, that's a simple process for me. For some reason, it was a little challenging this time around. I just wasn't getting, even though I used my tried and true base coat, scratch it, alcohol wash, dry brush white, it just was coming out chalky, like a too white. And I kept going back with the wire brush, and I would add the base color on there. You know, I just kept playing around with it till I got the right look. But that's the first time in a long time I didn't achieve the look that I wanted. Everything else was just smooth sailing. There wasn't any real, but you know, that took me a better part of a half a day to get right.
Yeah.
And I think it's all gonna, and the shingles, which I have right here, these are the gray ones. I'm not going to use these. I'm going to start all over with the shingles and make a brown. So that'll be next week.
Well, thank you so very much. It's a gorgeous looking model.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Well, now I want to have an announcement of a new build along that we're going to have on the show. It is actually going to start December the 6th show. It's going to be a kit that Gillen Lambert manufactures. And Earl Hackett is going to actually do the model building of the kit on the show. Well, both Dylan and Earl are here this evening. So Dylan, I'll turn it over to you first and let you talk about your company a little bit and about what this model that Earl's going to be building on the show is all about.
All right. So I'm Dylan Lambert. As some of you longtime
viewers may have at least heard my name or occasionally see my face. So Lambert Locomotive Works, I got started with ON30. That said, I've been expanding into other areas. HO is a more recent one because there was basically low-hanging fruit there, and that was basically presented by this car. So to basically go along with this TED Talk, first, I'm going to apply the Socratic method. What is the Boston and Albany? Okay, pretty simple. The Boston and Albany is a railroad between Boston and Albany. Okay, bad joking aside. The Boston and Albany people might think of as, oh, that's where the first superpower steam locomotive showed up. That's the major a major historical footnote. But the B&A was more than just a mountain railroad. The B&A was also a very urban railroad, at least in the Boston area. So I pulled up this little map to kind of help illustrate it. This is an older one from years ago that I found using the wonders of Google because I couldn't find a better one that really showed what we're talking about. So when you look at the legend and then you look at the area out in Boston, you're going to notice, one, there's a lot of track in Boston. Two, there's a lot of branches in Boston. Now, Boston was basically commuter country for the Boston and Main, the New Haven, and the B&A, although there was other railroads in play until basically the Boston and Main and New Haven merged into what they became after the 1900s. The B&A was always really more or less the B&A. It was originally the Boston and Worcester to start before the three railroads that built out to Albany were combined into one company. But traffic in the Boston area was always a major, as far as commuter train, or what we would call a commuter train today, was major for them. Commuter country basically ran from what is now South Station out as far as Framingham and then along the branches. People who are familiar with Boston know the Green Line, the trolleys. The D branch was originally part of the B&A's Boston area commuter network. It was basically created a giant loop that commuter trains would run out and back on to South Station in both directions. But their commuter country more or less ended at Framingham. What we consider commuter country today going out to Worcester a century ago really wasn't the case. So the 1920s roll along. Wooden cars are still a thing. There's still, a need for more equipment. So the B&A, having access to a car builder in Worcester, Osgood Bradley, which later became part of Pullman, went to Osgood Bradley and said, we need a commuter coach that, for whatever their reasoning was, whether it be to get rid of wooden cars or they just needed more cars. One of the problems with the B&A is the reasoning for why they did what they did. It's not easy to track down that documentation if you can find it all, if it still exists. But the B&A goes to Osgood Bradley. They're like, we need commuter coaches. So they came up with this. This was basically the first of 80 cars of this basic pattern that the B&A would own. And in essence, they were 100-seat coaches. Seats are the operative word here. That basically you stuff as many people in that car as possible and you get your commuter trains in and out of South Station. Now, when I say sitting, I mean that for a reason. As the B&A cars were built, I'm going to jump ahead real quick. You can see that there was standing room in the end of these cars where you could probably easily fit 15 people in either end of the car. There were no bathrooms. There's a decent ventilation system built into the car, which some secondhand owners would later really like. But these were essentially simple, easy to, simple cars meant to get people in and out of Boston because there were so many of them. So train of 8 cars, congratulations. You've got basically 800 plus people that you're getting out of South Station to go along your commuter corridor. The basic design didn't stay with the B&A long, though. The New York's, as many of us know, the New York Central owned the Boston and Albany, or at least leased it. It's basically, they might as well have owned it. The New York Central has had what they called the Putnam Division out of New York City, where they ordered 24 coaches for that route, or I'm sorry, not 24, 30, basically about 30 cars of the coaches for that, but there were some modifications. The B&A cars were even simpler than the ones built for the Putnam Division. There were no vestibule doors. There were no diaphragms. It was basically an open gangplate, brass platform gates that someone would open, and some handrails. New York Central's like, obviously they decided they wanted doors, they wanted diaphragms, but they also took the design a little bit further in that they had combines, because the Putnam Division did have a need for it because it was less of a commuter operation. And they had a version unique to the Putnam Division in this. There was only 2 of these built, and there was only one of the combines built for the New York Central. But this was basically an RPO with a baggage section and some passenger seats. You know, they were treating the design as a basis for a proper coach, as more of a coach and less of a commuter coach. For instance, these cars, especially the one combine that was built for Putnam, a bunch of the coaches from that division were taken and modified in the 1930s to create the New York Central's Mercury Streamliner. That was all built with these cars. They took them out to their shops, redid them, sent them out there. Now, the New York Central cars, of course, had bathrooms in the space where there would have been standing room, the baggage space, more baggage space, an extra toilet was in the RPO cars, and of course, RPO space. Now, while the New York Central and B&A were basically where the design got started, this is kind of where history diverges a little bit into a tangent, because the Chicago and Northwestern picked up a bunch of clones. Now, theirs were weird in the sense that they were using a lot of aluminum in their construction, where the B&A and New York Central cars didn't. Of the surviving cars of this pattern, 3 of the 5 cars are actually Chicago Northwestern combines, just because there were more of them. The Chicago Northwestern, basically, between them, the New York Central, and the B&A, there was probably just over 200 cars of this basic pattern floating around in major metropolitan areas. So you got 3 main railroads that own these things. There was more railroads that ended up picking them up, though. So the Chicago Northwestern did sell a lot of theirs off rather quickly. But the B&A and New York Central cars did go around, and this is where you start seeing weird stuff. One of the highlights of that was the Boston and Maine picking up 8 of them from New York Central. And what was weird about those was not necessarily the cars, but the trucks that were under at least one of them. Some of you might recognize those as what you would see more in place under like a Southern Pacific articulated diner. Yeah, kind of a weird place to find it under a commuter coach, but it did exist and it did run like that, although the B&M quickly put the original style back under the cars they bought. So these things ended up all over the place. Once time went on, it was more than just the B&A, New York Central, Chicago Northwestern. The Long Island Railroad picked up a bunch of them at that point, third hand, from the Delaware and Hudson, who picked up a bunch of them. The Boston and Maine picked up a bunch of them. New York Susquehanna and Western picked up 2 of them, which is where one of these surviving coaches comes from. It was one of their coaches that they had picked up. The D&H actually used at least 2 of their cars in their name trains, specifically the Adirondack. They also ended up using one as a training coach, where they basically set it up for teaching people how air brake systems worked, because they just, they happened to have it lying around. But for such a numerous car, because when you look at this, there's way more of these that were built than, say, the Lackawanna coaches we see at museums everywhere, or the Canadian National Heavyweights that are at various spots throughout the Northeast. It comes down to when these things were retired. They basically ran from the mid-1920s into the 60s and, into the late 60s before they were thrown out. And by that point, they were worn out. They did the job, and that was to move a lot of people at once as quickly and efficiently as possible. So what got me interested in these is, well, they were basically built in my backyard. And I had never seen one in O scale. Now you're going, oh, this is we're talking about an HO scale one. And to be fair, when I designed the car to be easily able to scale it down. It's easier to scale something down when you're drawing it than to scale it up. Of course, you can only scale it down to such a point. I've got a bunch of people in N scale who've been asking about these, and I'm trying to figure out how do I scale it down further than what I've scaled it down to. But you know, it's a process. The HO scale one was the obvious one. These were never done in O scale, so I did that. But then the HO ones, the only examples I could find were the old Railworks brass, which are kind of hard to find at this point because those things were built 40 years ago and there was a limited number of them to begin with anyway. But yeah, these things ended up all over the place. Various short lines ended up with them. The Otter Valley ended up with a bunch of them, although all of those cars are now scrapped. They were scrapped about, I think 2013. A bunch of them ended up at the Colony shops in New York. So at this point, there's 5 survivors. 2 of them are of the coach pattern and are either, one of them is definitely one of the original batch of B&A cars, would have been number 335. That's at the Whitewater Valley in Indiana. The second one is a little bit harder to pin down because it looks like it was one of the D&H cars, but it's not clear what cars the D&H bought from the New York Central. So the New York Central did renumber the B&A cars into their series, but when you look at what the D&H bought, there's really no clear records I've yet found on what cars were what and where exactly they came from. And that car is also a lot more different. It's basically was gutted internally and turned into almost a small, think almost like an Amfleet Cafe car type deal. There's a small kitchen in it, table seating. Basically, it's used as part of a dinner train. And then you've got the 3 combines. One of the combines is, of course, the Whitewater Valley in Indiana. There's another combine at Illinois Railway Museum and another at the Oklahoma Railway Museum. So there's 5 of these things floating around out of over 200 of just a basic workmanlike coach that was meant to do a job. And the ones that are still around are still doing it. So now as far as kit stuff goes, like I said, we did it as, you know, an HO scale kit, 3D printed. And the idea was to not just make a car that's hard to find in HO scale, because they are hard to find, but to also make it so it's easier to assemble, because I'm a single guy doing this. If I could build every car and send them out ready to run, I absolutely would, but I physically can't do it because there's only so much time in the day. That's why I tried to design the kit as easy as possible to assemble, while at the same time giving someone something that's unique, which is kind of the track I'm taking. With that said, I think why don't we stop for a second and ask if anyone has any questions? Because I have been rambling on what seems like a impromptu TED Talk. Well, what do you guys think? Does anyone have any questions?
So I'm assuming you're doing it like almost like an IKEA flat pack.
So no, so the car, the body and frame are basically printed as single pieces. So the body is basically a single piece and the frame is a single piece that the detail parts mount onto, whether it be the seats for the interior. Yes, it has seats, although it follows the B&A's seat only pattern. Underframe detail. Basically the few things you need for HO scale, which I could not reliably design for HO scale or are already sitting in someone's tool drawer. Wire for brakes and grabs. Window glazing, which I recommend like acetate or Lexan. And then what was the other one? I'm having a moment. I was doing so well. And then you've got the seats, you've got your parts, you can get the truck frames come with the coach to be itself. But when you order it, you can decide, okay, do I need wheels and couplers or do I already have them? So you could save a couple bucks there. When I look at the old Railworks cars, they're like, what, $300 or more. With the wheels and couplers, the shipping, you're at basically half that. It's $150 plus the shipping with the wheels and couplers without the discount for what we're doing here. But I wouldn't call it a flat pack. I would basically call it, and that's one of the things that 3D printing lets us get away with. Like the O scale one, I was able to do a lot more with because one, I had to go to a specialist because of how big it is in O scale. But like O scale, I was able to do the whole car as 2 pieces, body and frame that just screwed together. HO scale, a little bit trickier because one, it's a lot smaller, more fragile. The stuff can be more fragile. But at the same time, trying to clean all that up with the equipment we've got here in the US, okay, it was going to be safer in the long run to do it as, okay, how do you mount these parts? There's, whether it be index holes, whether it be stuff slotted to go in a certain spot, just to make it easier. And that's kind of the design philosophy I've taken with all of the kits that I've done, to be honest. It's keep it simple, because in someone who's new, who's never done it before, odds are they're going to be successful because it's a lot easier. Someone who's experienced, hey, it's something that someone, like I look at Al Judy in Owen 30 as an example of someone who could crank out a locomotive fully painted and running in less than 6 hours. So basically something that anyone at any skill level can easily do and be successful with. Oh, the only other thing we don't have is paint because, you know,
Yeah.
I go to Maycomber for that.
Well, Earl Hackett's with us tonight. Earl's going to be the one building this kit on the show. Earl, you want to share any thoughts with us?
Yeah. Yeah, we have I looked at a early version of it, and it's dead easy to build. The body just mounts on the frame. Seats just mount on, they're all positioned inside. The only tricky part might be putting in the doors, mounting doors in there. And the brake rigging underneath the brake rigging is probably the hardest part of the whole model to put together, if you're interested in seeing brake rigging. But otherwise, it's just two main pieces and some detail work. The trucks are absolutely beautiful. They're really nice. So yeah, I'm looking forward to doing the final version of it, and probably going to do a New York Central paint job.
Anything special modelers need to be able to build along with you, Earl?
Well, the only thing special, I knowing the limitations of 3D printing, the inside of the journals are probably going to be pretty rough, because you just can't. They're just not going to be the smooth machine journals that you expect from an injection molding or what. So what I'm looking at is using a 60-degree drill. Now there is one called the Micromart makes it. It's a truck journal.
Yeah,
crewing.
I know the one. I know the tool you're talking about.
Yeah, you stick it on there, you twist it around.
Yeah, you twist and it cleans up the journals.
Yeah.
The O scale truck was so much easier to keep that with because it was multiple pieces because it was sprung. The HO scale one springs that tiny are going to drive everyone insane, including me. Don't need me going insane as the designer, so let's avoid that. But at the same time, and you do bring up a good point, so far, haven't run into an issue, but you can't guarantee that all the time once you scale it down and you print it as a single piece.
Yeah.
That tool is your best friend as far as printing with a resin truck like this.
Yeah, that was my only concern with 3D printing on a truck, was the journal boxes, and they should be. You put that thing in there, 2 twists, and you're done. Fixes it right up.
Yeah. Dylan, what kind of discounts you're offering for this model?
So basically, we are offering, I think it was 20% off the list price. So it's the code, I think it was NTRAC or NewTrack. I'm having a moment, Jim, save me. I believe it was NTRAC was the exact code. So when you go, so 3DP out of Tennessee, I work with Dave Kamenek to make these because he does 3D printing. When I first started, I did a lot of stuff myself. When you're a one-man show, it's basically a triangle of there's 3 points on a triangle of what your priorities are: production, design, or packing those orders. For me, because I have a full-time job outside of this, when it became a lot easier to do the design work and the packing with the time I've got. So a lot of the production I've outsourced over the years to people who I know are capable of doing it. A lot of the stuff I've done, I've used a lot of nylon. It's only in the last year I've started getting back into resin because now the resin cost compared to say nylon or other materials from powder-based prints. It's comparable at this point, and it just in some of the resins, it's similar durability and it looks better. Nothing personal. I'm going to go with what looks better as long as it works. I don't want it to be fragile and, you know, someone accidentally like breathes on it and it shatters into a million pieces. Not what I want to happen to people, because then you're not going to have a good time. If you don't enjoy what you do, you're going to look and go, that sucked. You're going to throw it in a box. You're never going to think about it again. That's not really my style. I want you to enjoy what you build. So, and if you're building along with us, you get a discount on it. When you go to 3DP's website, when you go to the checkout, there's going to be a spot to punch in that code, punch it in, take the number right off. They'll take the discount right off it, and you'll be off and running. And like I said, you could save yourself a couple bucks if you don't need the wheels and couplers. Like, let's say you got like me, where I've got, 50 KD 148s in one box, and I don't even know how many wheel sets at this point because I stocked them for parts for other kits. Well, if you've got the wheels and couplers, yeah, maybe it's only, like $7 or thereabouts. But it's $7 that, hey, maybe you could use it for something else.
Yep.
Do you need window glazing? Do you want to, are you trying to find decals for that, or trying to make decals for that weird D&H instruction car? Because I've got one of the guys in O-Scale building it as that. And he's trying to, because he's like, ooh, I'm going to do that because it's just that weird factor of nobody's done it. Frees up some dollars in it. Now, to be fair, with what was already available, this is already a lot more cost effective, which I like keeping more money in my pocket too. Don't get me wrong. I do it as a business, but if you don't, I rather would help people out too. If I can make it cost effective too, great.
Exactly.
You can afford to do it.
So Dylan, can I go to your website and get all this information I need?
Yes, you can. You could go to lambertlocomotiveworks.com. The page for the HO scale car is cross-linked on the LLW website. It'll take you to the 3DP trains checkout, which is where it runs through, because me and Dave were like, it's just going to be easier to use his website code for that one instead of trying to figure out how do you connect like 3 different back-end systems to do one thing. Yeah, we were just both scratching our heads like, yeah, let's not make this more complicated than it has to. Let's just go through the checkout system with you, because then it works, and I'll just link it in. So when you go right to it, it's right there. There is an instruction packet. Now, with my instructions that I've done historically, they can get a little bit lengthy. Like the record holder right now is Tom York's old junkyard dog. When I bought that design from him and I did my own instructions, his instructions were 2 pages. Mine are 43 because I have pictures before and after of every step because, OCD kicked it, I guess.
Yeah.
Definitely had a little bit of OCD going with that one. Well, I'm like, no, we're going to cover everything. And then I didn't pay attention to the page count until the end. So there is actually a link on the 3DP page where you could pull up that digital file. If for some reason you can't print it out, I tell people this at shows, I tell people if they email me, if you can't print it out for whatever reason, or you're just like, look, I'm not computer savvy, I could use a hand. I'm an email away, I'm a phone call away. My contact info is up on the Lambert Locomotive Works website. It's up on our Facebook page. It's going to be on the Patreon page too. Yes, we set up a Patreon because why not? Give people another way to support it. Maybe you can't throw out $150 for a kit, but maybe you could throw out $5 or $6 to help, offset some of the costs of developing this stuff. Because it's not just finding drawings. Some of this stuff I'm going to have to physically go out to actually look at it to figure it out, which means calling the people that own it. Hey, can I come in and not get arrested because I'm trespassing, because I'm just waltzing right in and I don't have Kevin Maycomber's level of sheer dumb luck of being able to get away with that. So yeah, there's stuff I'm going to have to go out and look at. Like I want to do a Mac FCD, that rail bus, because I can power it. I have a mechanism that works for it perfectly, but when you look at the drawings and you're like, okay, that's really weird, like the nose on it, you have to physically go out, find one to go look at. That's gas, that's time, that's equipment you're going to need to be able to properly measure it. A pair of calipers that I would use on my desk to measure a model ain't going to cut it with a full-size piece of equipment. So it's another way people could. So there's the Patreon. That's our contact's going to be on there. It's on our website. It's on our Facebook. I'm a pretty open book. Just when I'm at the day job, it's a little bit tricky to answer the phone, but I will get back to you as soon as possible and make sure we get you all squared away.
What a lot of you may not know, when I first started these shows 4 years ago, Dylan was my first telephone call because I'd only been to one Zoom show in my life, had no idea how to do it technically. And Dylan was the technical wizard for probably the first 2 years that we did.
Yeah, about 2 years before I handed that baton off. And that was Maycomer's fault. That was, I wouldn't even say Maycomer's fault. That was him saying, "Hey, I know someone who could do it," and him giving you my phone number.
Yes, he did. But anyway, those were learning days for both of us. I'll tell you, if we thought we knew what we were getting involved in, we had no idea.
No, we 2 years ago, when we're just sitting here on because everyone's stuck at home and we're all bored out of our gourds and going stir crazy. Yeah, no, we had no idea what we were doing back then.
Absolutely.
We certainly do now, which is very good.
Dylan, thanks so much. Earl, thank you so much for being here tonight. I look forward to seeing the bill in December, and look forward to seeing some of the models that are built on the My Bill shows later. So guys, thanks so much for joining us.
Okay, very good.
Thanks, Dylan.
Have a good one, guys.
Yes, sir. Well, now I want to turn to Steve Sherrill for one of the really interesting segments that of our shows it's become. I get a lot of favorable comments about it, and it's, what do you want to talk about? So Steve, welcome. What do you want to talk about?
Well, tonight we're going to first quote William Shakespeare. And he had a saying, "To weather or not to weather, that is the question." So that's what we're going to talk about tonight, is weathering. Weathering, of course, is a personal choice that we all make. We can either weather, or we don't have to weather. Today, we've seen Tom Farrell weather a station. We know that Gary has a plastic kit that started out as pure white. When he finishes, I know it's not going to look like that because he's going to weather it. So let's take a look at some weathering. And this is just some of the things that I have done. Whoops. You can't see, all you see is me. Okay. So there's an item for my granddaughter. Completely unweathered, but ready for the show. Look at the pumpkins. I'm ready for the My Build. Now here's the same model weathered. Doesn't even look like the same model. But it's exactly the same with just a few detail parts added. Then I have some disconnects, which I have. These are Lionel disconnects. The first one is out of the box. The second one, whoops.
Why did I know that was going to happen?
Yeah. The third one has got two different paints on it. The third one, I started out with rust colored and painted the whole thing rust, and then lightly went back over with black. And so you get a completely different look. You get a little bit of the rust coming through. Here's two boxcars. One with this paint starting to come off, and one out of the box stock. So these are things that enhance our railroad and make it look a lot better. Our models no longer look like they came out of the box. They're more railroady looking. And I have different methods that I use, which one of the items that I use is, of course, the rattle can. I do have a little attachment which goes on the top, which looks like a handle. And it fits on and gives you a much better control when you're shooting your model. For the new cans that have the thicker tops, as you can see here, they also have another size that goes on. And of course, I get this at Home Depot or somewhere like that. But it really gives you a nice control for a much better flow than if you don't have this on there and you don't get your finger nearly as much paint on it. Another thing I have is called a cordless airbrush. And if you've never seen one of these things, or had the pleasure to use one, they're well worth the $35 that you spend. And most of them are complete with the dual action airbrush, the little tank. They have gravity feed bottle. And they come with the brushes and also the electrical connections. They'll go about 45 minutes of spraying. And they have the brushes to clean. And so they're really neat.
Hey,
Nice
Steve,
little-
did you get that at Micromark?
No.
Okay.
I get this off of eBay. And I before Micromark ever came out with these. These actually started as makeup applicators for women. They used to spray on their, what do you call it? Anyway, they used to spray on their makeup. So I don't know if you can hear it, but here it is on. That's as much noise as it makes. I found it especially handy when you've gone over something like rocks. I have a big rock wall, and occasionally I would discover that I missed a place, and I would just pick this up, go over and hit that. Also, if you have trees, a tree hillside, you can go over and put lighter colors on it to get a much nicer blended mix. So those are excellent.
How's that
And
powered, Steve?
It's powered by a LiPo battery, and you plug it in the bottom, and it's got lights on it like a lot of the electrical things we have today. When you turn it on, you get a number of lights, okay? So when you charge it, it'd be 4 lights. After you use it, it gets down to 3, 2, and 1. It automatically goes off. So it's a really, really nice item to have.
Somebody
we have the-
that just shared a comment about Walmart had a better one. Could they elaborate on that a little?
I don't know.
Yeah, that was me. It's Clark Cooning. Yeah, Walmart had a little stronger one. A lot of the other ones are about 9 or 10 PSI. The Walmart one was rated around 13 to 14.
Well, this is 25.
Or sorry, it was higher than that. That was another one. Yeah. It's
Clark,
that one's rated at 25.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I think that's what this Walmart one was. I'd have to get it out. It's been a long time.
Clark, was that a makeup airbrush?
They didn't market it. They just sold it as an airbrush.
Okay.
It's USB powered, and they had it. I got one. I know a couple of the other guys that have been on here. Bob Farquhar and that put me onto one to it, and he's had it. I can look for I think I may have the info still on it. I can maybe post it in the chat after.
Well, this particular one is sold by a company called Spray Gunner.
Yeah.
They're out of Florida, and they have adapters now that you can get other makes of airbrush. You can put all your makes on here, you know? And that was the reason why a lot of people kind of shied away from these in the beginning. Now, I've had this about 4 years. So there seem to be a lot of choices. If you go on somewhere like Amazon or just eBay, you'll see a lot of them. But to me, I think they're well worth the money. You don't have to worry about any cord length or anything like that as far as the air. It's just a nice item. But I know that one of the things about weathering, and I don't know if Tom or Gary do this or not, or anybody else. If you live along a dirt road, travel on a dirt road stirs up a lot of dirt and dust. Do you reflect that on your buildings, on your houses, on your cars, that kind of thing? These are all little things that you can add to weathering to make your scene more realistic. There are probably a lot of other things you could do. I know Tom was just talking about the paint looking chalky. Well, there was a time when paint actually looked chalky. They had alkaline or something in the paint, I believe, Tom.
Yeah.
And that created that look. So I don't know what era you're actually modeling or what year, but I've seen houses that had that look. Older houses that were painted, or not painted very often. So, you know, sometimes we make mistakes, we're not satisfied, but they're prototypical.
Yeah.
So it's just the weathering really, really creates a nice atmosphere in the railroad. I don't know if anybody else has any questions or any comments, but I just thought I would introduce this tonight and kind of put it out there because all of our modelers are really weathering up their finished models to make them look really nice. I'm really looking forward to see how Gary finishes his off. So I guess that's it for tonight, and we have more questions.
Well, I've never seen a spray gun like that before. I'd never even heard of one.
Good. Did you hear it?
Yeah, almost.
Yeah, you can't hear it. So, and they have, some of them are, ergonomically correct, and they conform to your hand, and whatever you want. I just want the basic item, and you do get it. It may seem awkward in the beginning, but it really gives you a lot of flexibility. You don't have to deal with that hose. You don't have to, there's no limit on the length. You can have to be away from the compressor, and it's so quiet. I mean, just, it's wonderful. So that's it for tonight, folks.
Well, Steve, thank you so very much. Look forward to seeing you next week.
Okay.
Well, now we're going to do something a little different. And before I do it, if you have a pencil or can memorize it, my email is Jim Kellow, JimKellow @newtracksmodeling.com. What we want to know is which of the show segments that you saw tonight did you most enjoy, that you thought was the coolest, that you think was the best. And I don't want to embarrass anybody. So what I'd like for you to do, if you can, is take a few minutes and send me an email with which one of the segments you enjoyed the most. And what we're going to try to do is start keeping track of this each show so that going into next year, we can try to tailor the show to more what everybody really thinks is what they want to see and the kind of events that we want to try to concentrate on. So if you can help us, we're not trying to embarrass anybody or anything like that. We're just trying to gather some basic information so that hopefully we can make the show more what you want it to be. Jim Kellow @newtracksmodeling.com. Appreciate hearing from you. And with that said, Pat, I think we've got this gigantic train that we'd like to show off in our caboose.
And I thought, shit. But better tomorrow.
Thanks so much for joining us this evening. Hope you enjoyed the show. Most importantly, I hope you learned something. That's what this is all about. See you next week.